History remembers great kings as heroes, men who conquered nations, built empires, led armies into battle. But not every ruler wanted to be loved. Some wanted fear, and the terrifying part is, fear worked. Across castles, kingdoms, and burning cities, there were rulers so brutal that even their closest allies lived in constant terror. Kings who executed friends, destroyed entire populations, and turned suffering into a tool of power. Some believed cruelty made them stronger. Others were consumed by paranoia, and a few seemed to enjoy watching the world burn. Today, we are diving into the most cruel kings in history. And as this video goes on, you'll notice something disturbing. The more power these men gained, the less human they seemed to become. Vlad the Impaler. When people hear the name Dracula, most imagine a fictional vampire. But the real man behind the legend was arguably worse. His name was Vlad III, better known as Vlad the Impaler. And unlike the stories, he was real. Vlad ruled Wallachia, a region located in modern-day Romania during the 15th century. His childhood was filled with violence and fear from the very beginning. As a boy, Vlad was taken hostage by the Ottoman Empire, along with his younger brother. They were kept as political prisoners, while their father tried to maintain power back home. Many historians believe those years changed Vlad forever. Because when he finally returned and took the throne, he became obsessed with control. He believed mercy was weakness, fear was power, and pain was the perfect warning. Vlad's favorite method of execution became infamous across Europe: impalement. Victims were placed onto massive wooden stakes and slowly pierced through the body. Death could take hours, sometimes days, and Vlad didn't hide the bodies. He displayed them publicly. Travelers described entire fields covered with impaled corpses outside cities and roads. Imagine marching toward a kingdom and seeing thousands of bodies lining the horizon. That was the message Vlad wanted to send. Enter my land, and this will happen to you. What made him even more terrifying was how calm he reportedly remained during these horrors. Some stories claim he ate meals while watching executions. Others say he enjoyed the psychological effect more than the violence itself. But strangely enough, many people inside his kingdom respected him. Why? Because crime nearly disappeared under his rule. Thieves feared him. Corrupt officials feared him. Invaders feared him. To some, Vlad was a monster. To others, he was the only thing protecting the kingdom from chaos. And maybe that is what makes history so unsettling. Sometimes the line between hero and monster depends entirely on which side survived to tell the story. Ivan the Terrible. If Vlad ruled through fear, Ivan ruled through paranoia. Ivan the Kefar became the first Tsar of Russia and entered history with a name that still follows him centuries later: Ivan the Terrible. But Ivan was not born cruel, at least not at first. After the death of his parents, Ivan spent much of his childhood neglected inside the Russian court. Powerful noble families fought for influence, while the young prince watched violence unfold around him. He grew up surrounded by betrayal, manipulation, and fear. And over time, something inside him hardened. When Ivan first became ruler, he actually showed promise. He improved parts of the government, strengthened Russia's military, and expanded the nation's territory. But everything changed after the death of his wife, Anastasia. Ivan became convinced that enemies surrounded him, not foreign enemies, everyone, nobles, advisors, friends, even members of his own family. His paranoia spiraled out of control. To eliminate possible threats, Ivan created a brutal force known as the Oprichnina, essentially his personal army of terror. Their job was simple: crush anyone suspected of betrayal. Entire towns were punished. Families disappeared overnight. Executions became public spectacles. One of the darkest moments came in the city of Novgorod. Ivan believed the city was planning to betray him, so he ordered a massacre. Thousands died, Men, women, children, priests. The streets reportedly ran with blood for days. But despite all this cruelty, the most tragic moment of Ivan's life happened inside his own palace. During an argument with his eldest son, Ivan lost control. In a burst of rage, he struck him with a staff. The injury proved fatal. According to witnesses, Ivan immediately realized what he had done and collapsed in horror beside his dying son. That image, a powerful ruler destroyed by his own violence, became one of the most haunting moments in royal history. Ivan spent years trying to eliminate enemies. But in the end, his greatest destruction came from within himself. Henry VIII. Henry VIII is often remembered as the king with 6 wives. But behind that famous image was a ruler whose obsession with power changed England forever. When Henry first became king, people admired him. He was athletic, educated, charming. He looked like the perfect monarch. But over time, one problem consumed him completely. He desperately wanted a male heir. As years passed and his marriages failed to produce the successor he wanted, Henry became increasingly ruthless. His frustration slowly turned into cruelty. When the Catholic Church refused to approve the annulment of his marriage, Henry did something unthinkable. He broke away from the Church entirely. This decision led to the creation of the Church of England and completely transformed the religious future of the country. All because one king refused to accept no, and the people around him paid the price. Henry ordered the execution of 2 of his wives, including Anne Boleyn, one of the most famous queens in English history. She was accused of adultery and treason. Many historians believe the charges were exaggerated or manipulated so Henry could remove her. But it wasn't only his wives who suffered. Anyone who opposed him risked imprisonment or execution. Former allies disappeared. Religious critics were punished. Fear spread through the royal court. And as Henry grew older, his temper worsened. The once charismatic king became isolated, unhealthy, and deeply suspicious of others. It's strange to think that one man's obsession for control and legacy reshaped an entire nation. But history is full of moments like that. Moments where personal desire becomes national tragedy. If you're enjoying this video so far, take a second to like and subscribe. Channels like this survive because of viewers who love history, storytelling, and the darker side of the past. And trust me, the next rulers only become more disturbing. Nero's few rulers became symbols of excess and cruelty, quite like Nero. Even today, his name is almost synonymous with chaos. Nero became emperor of Rome at just 16 years old. At first, his reign seemed stable. Advisors helped manage the empire, and Rome remained relatively peaceful. But as Nero gained confidence, he also became more dangerous. He grew obsessed with attention, luxury, and his own image. He wanted to be admired not just as emperor, but as an artist. And anyone who threatened his power or his ego quickly became expendable. Nero ordered the death of his own mother, then later, his wife. Political rivals vanished around him. Fear spread through the Roman elite because nobody knew who would become the next target. But the event forever tied to Nero's name was the Great Fire of Rome. In the year 64 AD, massive flames consumed large sections of the city. Chaos erupted. People fled through smoke-filled streets, while entire neighborhoods collapsed into ash. Rumors soon spread that Nero watched the destruction while performing music and admiring the fire from a distance. Historians still debate how accurate those stories are. But one thing is certain: Nero used the disaster to his advantage. After the fire, he began rebuilding parts of Rome according to his own vision, including a gigantic, luxurious palace known as the Domus Aurea. And to redirect public anger, Nero blamed a small religious group that many Romans already distrusted: the Christians. What followed was brutal persecution. Many Christians were arrested, tortured, and executed publicly. Over time, even members of Nero's inner circle turned against him. The Senate eventually declared him an enemy of Rome. Abandoned and cornered, Nero fled the city. Facing capture, he took his own life. According to legend, his final words were, "What an artist dies in me." Even at the very end, Nero seemed more concerned with his image than the empire he ruled. Caligula. If Nero was consumed by ego, Caligula became consumed by absolute power, and perhaps madness. Caligula ruled Rome for only a few years, but his reputation became legendary for all the wrong reasons. At first, people loved him. He was young, charismatic, and seen as a fresh start after the harsh rule of Emperor Tiberius. But shortly after gaining power, something changed. Some historians believe Caligula suffered a serious illness that affected his mind. Others believe the power simply revealed who he truly was. Whatever happened, Rome soon became trapped under one of its most unpredictable rulers. Caligula humiliated senators publicly, spent enormous amounts of money on extravagant projects, and demanded to be treated like a living god. People around him lived in constant uncertainty. One day, you might receive wealth and praise. The next day, execution. Stories about Caligula became so bizarre that some historians still debate which ones are true. The most famous claim says he planned to make his horse a consul of Rome. Whether literal or symbolic, the story captured how little respect he had for the political system around him. To Caligula, everyone else seemed beneath him. Eventually, even the Roman guards assigned to protect him grew tired of the chaos. At just 28 years old, Caligula was assassinated by members of his own guard. And once again, history showed a brutal pattern. Many rulers spend their lives creating fear, only to die surrounded by the very fear they created. Leopold II. Not every cruel ruler lived in ancient times. Some existed far more recently than people realize. King Leopold II of Belgium ruled during the late 19th century, and while he rarely committed violence personally, the system he created in Africa became one of the deadliest colonial regimes in history. Leopold gained personal control over a massive territory in Central Africa known as the Congo Free State. The name sounded harmless. The reality was horrific. Under Leopold's rule, local populations were forced to harvest rubber under impossible quotas. Failure to meet demands often resulted in brutal punishment. Villages were burned. Families were separated. People were mutilated as punishment or intimidation. Millions are believed to have died during this period from violence, starvation, disease, and forced labor. And for years, much of the world barely understood the scale of the suffering. What makes Leopold especially disturbing is how carefully he crafted his public image. He presented himself as a humanitarian, bringing civilization and progress to Africa. Meanwhile, unimaginable cruelty unfolded behind the scenes. Eventually, international outrage exposed the truth, but by then, the damage was already irreversible. Leopold's story is a reminder that cruelty does not always look like rage. Sometimes it wears a suit, speaks politely, and hides behind politics and profit. Conclusion. History often glorifies kings, the crowns, the castles, the victories. But behind many thrones stood fear, suffering, and bloodshed. These rulers controlled armies, nations, and millions of lives. Yet many of them couldn't control themselves. Paranoia destroyed Ivan. Obsession consumed Henry. Ego swallowed Nero. Power corrupted Caligula. And Vlad turned fear into an empire of terror. The frightening part is that these stories are not just about the past. They reveal something timeless about human nature. Because throughout history, whenever people gain unchecked power, the same question always returns. How far will someone go once they stop seeing others as human? And maybe that is why these kings continue to fascinate us centuries later. Not because they were powerful, but because they showed how dangerous power can become in the wrong hands. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and stay with us for more stories about the darkest figures in history. Because the past is filled with rulers, wars, betrayals, and mysteries far stranger than fiction. And this was only the beginning.